There's always something about watching lost media that feels a little uneasy, no matter how wholesome the content is. Sometimes it's nostalgic, most of the time it's nightmare fuel, and sometimes it's not even real. The idea of a lost TV episode or $5 budget indie film being lost for years and then suddenly rediscovered and shared to thousands, if not millions, of people overnight is something that's very specific to internet culture. Therefore, lost media is the perfect subject for digital horror. And it's even more effective when the content in question is as presumably innocent as an old Flash game for 8-year-old girls. As the title suggests, I'm referring to Lacey's Flash Games, which is a series here on YouTube. And if you're unfamiliar with the series, I must warn you that there are some pretty heavy themes ahead. As of right now, there are 3 installments in the series, each one focusing on the titular character as she navigates various odd jobs and the general experience of female adolescence. It's all very fascinating and terrifying. So, without further ado, this is an analysis of Lacey's Flash Games and the horrors of girlhood. On October 10th, 2022, a channel called Ghost Tundra uploaded Lacey's Wardrobe Lost 2006 Flash Game. This video is a playthrough of the aforementioned computer game. The art style and game premise are immediately reminiscent of something you would find on Girls Go Games, which, if you aren't familiar, is a website launched in 2007 that hosts hundreds of minigames catered toward a young female audience. I've easily played at least 50 games on that site that are nearly identical to Lacey's Wardrobe, so this video immediately feels nostalgic. At the start of Lacey's Wardrobe, the player is met with a simple explanation of their duties. Dress up Lacey, pictured here, for 3 events she has throughout the day. First up, picnic at the park. Once the player finalizes the outfit, all that's left to do is press ready and see Lacey at the park, which we do. As does that thing. The second outfit is for the mall. The player cycles through the customization options once again, but as they get to the shoes, the screen freezes and a phone rings.
Lacey, did you see my stacks, Lacey? I can wait to meet up, Lacey. I want to. Have a good time tonight with you, Lacey. Tonight. Bye-bye.
We're introduced to Lacey's stalker by his voice, and once he finishes what he has to say, the screen goes dark. When we see Lacey in her room again, a familiar face sits in her window, watching from behind. Again, the player finishes the outfit and presses ready. This time, we see Lacey alone at the mall. Alone as in no stalker, but also alone as in there's literally no one else around at what should be a pretty busy time of day. It's unsettling, to say the least. And then, just before the event ends, Lacey speaks directly to the player for the first time, asking for help and stating with factual certainty that he, her stalker, is going to kill her. Either she can predict the future, or, more horrifyingly, she's lived through this before, fully aware of every new playthrough and the unavoidable end. But the game continues. As the player dresses up Lacey for a date, the room is dark and someone continuously knocks on a door off screen. As the player goes to the shirt options, one choice reads, "There is a gift on your doorstep," which, naturally, the player chooses. And then, another phone call.
Lacey, I'm here. I'm here. Did you get my gift, Lacey? Did you like it? I'm here. Open the door, my darling. Open the door. Open the fucking door!
Although Lacey doesn't externally respond to any of this, we do get another fourth wall break. She uses text to beg the player not to make her go outside. However, there isn't a choice for us to cancel her date or otherwise keep her indoors. You can either press ready and send Lacey off into the next environment, or you can turn off the game, forever suspending Lacey at this moment, just a window away from her stalker. The player chooses to finish the game, and for the last time, Lacey speaks directly to them with a simple, "What have you done?" And then a black screen. After a moment of silence, we hear a woman, presumably Lacey, wail in pain alongside the sound of flesh being severed. And then a few photos flash on screen, each of a different, dismembered part of Lacey's body, of course, donning the outfit chosen by the player. In the final moments of the game, we get a close-up of her stalker's face and a message from him which reads, "I ate her remains so that we will be together forever. I love you, Lacey." If you've come across any other video on this series, then you've almost certainly been introduced to the concept of digital horror, which is a fairly new term in media analysis. Digital horror is a successor to analog horror, where the Blair Witch Project, Petscop, and the Mandela Catalog fall into, if you're familiar with those series. Essentially, analog horror is created with the aesthetics of analog electronics in mind. So think VHS tapes or early gaming consoles or TV until about the early 2000s. Digital horror, on the other hand, is created with the aesthetics of the early internet in mind. Like Baldi's Basics, which parodies early educational video games for kids, or movies like Unfriended that exclusively take place online. With that context, we can confidently establish Lacey's games as digital horror. And one recurring theme in that genre is the idea of sentient technology, which we clearly see here. Lacey isn't supposed to know that she's inside of a video game with zero free will, and she certainly should not beg the player to protect her by not finishing the game. And this brings up an interesting question. Is Lacey actually breaking the confines of her medium, or are we just led to believe that by the game developer? And if it's the latter option, why on earth would anyone create and distribute a game like this to children? We'll get to that. For now, I want to go over a couple of other themes we see in Lacey's wardrobe, all of which fall under this umbrella of feminine horror. In 2017, 13.4 million people reported being stalked in the US. 2/3 of those victims were women, and roughly 80% of female victims reported having a male stalker. While stalking can happen to and be perpetrated by anyone, women and girls are overwhelmingly the victims. Most of the comments under this video seem to be posted by women, largely tying their personal experiences to the events of the game. It's very insightful and terrifying, but these comments offer this sort of disturbing comfort that creates a safe community to be vulnerable in. So, it's kind of wholesome. The last thing I want to note before we move on to the next playthrough is the framing of the ending in contrast to the rest of the game. When the presumably female player has control over Lacey, we see her body in its entirety. But when the male stalker decides to take control over Lacey's body, we see it in pieces. Obviously, she's been dismembered, so her body literally is in pieces, but this is a recurring theme we see in media rooted in the male gaze. Fragmenting the female body on screen is a form of objectification that's been around for as long as visual media has. The goal is to pacify a woman by presenting her body as an object that has actions done to it by a man rather than being active herself. Now, Lacey is a passive character because she literally cannot move without someone else's permission, so that's not to say that the player or the game developer are ethically in the clear at any point. Still, I think it's interesting to see how this trademark of the male gaze came up in this game, whether it was intentional or not. About a month later, on November 1st, 2022, Ghost Tundra uploaded Disturbing Secret Found in 2007 Flash game, Lacey's Diner. This time, we get some commentary from the uploader, who claims they found this version of Lacey's Diner on an archive site with an ending they had never seen before. In the game, Lacey owns a diner and enlists the help of the player to give her the correct ingredients for each meal and serve the final dish to the customers. There is a generous timer on screen to finish these tasks, but should the last 10 seconds approach, things get sinister pretty quickly.
Can you please get me? That's it. Can you please get me? That's it. Can you please?
Barely beating the clock, the player finishes the meal on time, serves it to the customers, and everything plays out as normal. In a second playthrough, however, the player purposefully runs out of time to showcase the secret ending. For a moment, we get a peek into Lacey's inner monologue with this grainy collage before we see that all the customers have left and we have to try again tomorrow. That night, we get glimpses of Lacey's bleak walk home and some more monologuing, which reveals the importance of this diner's success to her. On the second day, the player lets the time run out again. This time, Lacey briefly disappears before showing up a moment later, now in the form of a creepier drawing of herself. Through text, Lacey chastises her customers for their impatience, notably never getting angry at the player. In retaliation, on the third day, Lacey, with the help of the player, creates what I can only describe as a nightmare of a meal. As the player puts each ingredient into the bowl, an image corresponding to and expanding upon the significance of each item shows on screen. Cigarette butts, thrown in for the times he puts cigarettes out on Lacey's legs. A cockroach, symbolic of the infestation Lacey lives in with the aforementioned nameless male character. Pornography, which it seems Lacey was exposed to at an early age, potentially by the same man. Then there's meth, which doesn't have a super clear explanation, but one way or another, Lacey has had personal experience with the drug. And notice how the name Rocio is displayed very clearly. This is the first time we've heard this name, but this character is incredibly important in the series, so keep that in mind. Rocio, whoever that is likely a meth user. Next is a used condom, and in the image here, text describes a clearly non-consensual sexual encounter Lacey had with him when she was younger. Then there's broken glass, representative of a serious injury Lacey sustained with it, either due to the negligence of her caretakers or purposeful self-harm. And the last ingredient is the one that ties everything before it together: the decapitated head of Lacey's uncle, who we can now assume is who she's been referring to throughout the creation of this meal. We serve the dish to the customers, and very soon after, Lacey's diner is closed due to sanitary violations. What a surprise. In the final moments of Lacey's story, she commits to her previous declaration. In the last few moments, we see a couple of images. In the first, a girl sits in front of a computer, bound with wires and covered in blood. Because she doesn't have Lacey's signature blue hair, we know this isn't her, but she must be connected to the story somehow. The second photo provides a closer look at the scene, making it very clear to us that whoever this is has computer wires literally puncturing her body. While I do have a theory for what's going on here, it won't really make sense without the context of the third game, so we'll circle back. Lacey's Pet Shop 2007 Flash game was uploaded to Ghost Hunter's channel in July of 2023. This is actually the first video I came across, unfortunately very late at night, and genuinely felt haunted by it. I do think it's interesting how this is the first title in the series that doesn't allude to any sinister themes happening, but there's a content warning in the first few frames, so hopefully no unassuming children were traumatized.
Hello!
This video expands on the lore of Lacey's universe in immense capacity. It starts off with an audio interview given by Grace, the co-founder of Yanni Also Games, which is the website that hosts Lacey's games. Although Grace initially denies being a founder, the website says otherwise, crediting both Grace and someone named Rocio Yanni. According to Grace, she was entirely unaware of any alternative endings until parents with mortified children demanded an explanation. While the interview plays, we see a few screenshots, the most notable of which include Rocio's vicious response to a 9-year-old's fan art of Lacey. Clearly, she harbors an unadulterated hostility toward children, so the motive behind these endings is made a little clearer, but why? What does Rocio have against childhood? And why are young girls specifically being targeted? I'm gonna walk us through Lacey's pet shop now, and I think a lot of questions will be answered by the context that game provides. In this game, Lacey runs a grooming service where she tailors each pet's appearance to what their owners ask for. I would argue that the first customer is the only normal one, simply asking for Lacey to bathe and trim her dog. After that, the requests slowly get more ludicrous. Contact lenses for a cat, dentures for a turtle, and elongating the neck of a hamster, among other acts of permanent disfiguration. And then, as Lacey calls in the final customer, and we're thrown into what seems like an entirely new game played in first-person perspective. The only goal given is to enter the house before the protagonist, who is presumably, but not definitely, Lacey, and maybe find the exit that lies within. But before she can do that, Lacey must first convince this skeleton cat thing to let her pass. Because a bird stole its skin earlier that day, it refuses to help anyone, stating simply, "I have been hurt, so I will hurt others." Because the sentiment is a bit on the nose, it helps us understand the game's creator, Rocio, a little better. "I have been hurt, so I will hurt others" is a recurring theme in this series, seen before in Lacey's diner. Her customers, albeit impatient ones, weren't responsible for the years of domestic abuse Lacey underwent. However, they were the recipients of a meal that she materialized from this trauma, which was not only unwarranted, but unjust. Lacey finds and returns Skelecat's skin, and with gratitude, it lets her enter the house. From here, the player is tasked with exploring each room inside, beginning with the dining room. A few pigs sit around a table, eating flowers. When Lacey gets close enough to speak to them, the screen goes dark and this wall of text appears. You can read the whole thing if you like, and I must warn you, there is a lot of reading from here on out, but every word is crucial to puzzling together a story. The following, though, in my opinion, are the most important bits. "I've always known what you are. From the moment you first touched me to when I found myself stepping over remains of your skin glued to the floor. You squealed like a pig. This had been my childhood dream, the one you took from me. I collected all those bruises for years. You made a mistake. You took my angel away." Behind the text, you can barely make out the image of a small dog. The author, either the character Lacey or Rocio, the actual person, not so subtly admits to murdering their abuser for taking their dog away. This could simply mean that the dog was given away without the author's permission, but given the themes in the series, I would argue that this angel is no longer with us. Then the pigs disappear, and it seems like they were never really there in the first place. Across the hall is the living room, where a backwards ticking grandfather clock and a large cage sit inside, among other furniture. Lacey begs the player to click on the cage, which not only reveals to us that she knows she's in a video game with no free will, but also supports the theory of her sentience in Lacey's wardrobe. Suddenly, we see Lacey sitting inside the cage, hugging herself and saying, "Yes, I know. No one forced me back inside, but this pain just hurts so comfortably." This moment clearly displays the effects of long-term abuse that Lacey experienced. We already knew that, but I guess this just showcases how far it went. Lacey willingly putting herself in the cage not only comforts her, but also allows her to reclaim her bodily autonomy. This, unfortunately, is not a rare form of self-consolation for many victims of abuse. In the cage, Lacey finds a key and uses it to unlock the door that leads upstairs. In the box she normally uses to communicate with the player, hazy text appears for a moment, reading, "Uncle, have you seen Puddles anywhere? I can't find her. I checked everywhere. Stop laughing." It seems like Lacey's reliving a memory. For the first time in the game, she calls her uncle by name, tying together the events of Lacey's pet shop and Lacey's diner. As if we needed any more proof, her uncle is solidified as the antagonist of the series. The player explores the bathroom next, where Lacey swears this tub of dark liquid is only lemonade. There are two ways we can interpret this. Either she's telling the truth and the game is both lighthearted and self-aware enough to poke fun at horror tropes like this, or she's lying. I personally lean toward the second option because I think Lacey believes that we trust her enough to just blindly believe her without proof. Whether she's intentionally lying or suppressing memories of what happened here, she kind of establishes herself as an unreliable narrator. Lacey looks in the mirror and, after affirming her identity, an encouraged practice among survivors of abuse, her reflection disappears and we see this. Rocio is communicating with us. In case you missed it, the text here, in part, reads, "It sticks and it smells. Someone melted here. Pulverized remains enter my pores. I suck it all up. My legs swell and turn yellow." In short, Rocio is describing the smell of a rotting body. Because her life at the very least parallels Lacey's, it's not unreasonable to assume that Rocio killed the very person she's speaking about here and is potentially still living with him. And that's enough to make anyone go insane, I'm sure. Instead of creating these games for her own amusement, I think Rocio is actually warning her target audience of what they have to fear. What real girls' games they'll have to play in their own lives where the result is always the same: abuse, trauma, and even death. Obviously, this is a very pessimistic way to view female childhood, but it's not unwarranted, especially coming from someone who experienced these things firsthand. Back in the game, the player explores Lacey's bedroom next, and this place seems to be the most haunted.
But it never was real. It was just a bizarre story that somehow happened to my life. But it never was real. But I had a dream that was so good. I dreamed that it was me and another who killed 2 years ago. And that's worse.
And then, for a moment, we get a peek into Rocio's reality. In a dark room, she daydreams and imagines herself as Lacey, showcasing her disassociation. Quick note, remember these photos? I think it's safe to say that this is Rocio, and these pictures are a representation of her disassociation. Some people have theorized that Rocio literally transferred her consciousness to the internet and somehow hijacked the Lacey series, but I'm gonna be honest, that's a little out there for me, especially considering the technology we had in the mid-2000s. I'm inclined to believe that this is nothing more than a visual representation of how Rocio feels connected to Lacey, which we have plenty of evidence to support. Rocio breaks from the fantasy for a bit, noting how she hasn't eaten for days but just can't leave because he's still under the bed and he'll look at her. The way this is worded insinuates that Rocio is physically capable of leaving the house. However, because of the guilt she has over killing her uncle and stuffing him under her bed with his eyes open, she's created this imaginary blockade for herself. This would also explain why Grace hasn't seen Rocio in years. Even with her abuser dead, Rocio can't escape his hold on her autonomy. He still keeps her confined to this house. Rocio has this moment of self-awareness where she realizes how harmful this entire situation is to her well-being. But after a flashback of the moment she killed her uncle, she says, "My sweet little doggy, my little angel, I couldn't take it anymore. You can hurt me all you'd like, but weren't allowed to take it away from me. I will let you rot." So, it doesn't seem like she'll change this living situation anytime soon. Back in the game, there's one last room to explore. Inside, there's candle wax pushed into every corner, except for the center of the room where a box of matches sits. Lacey suggests using them to light herself on fire to wake up and force Rocio to come to terms with her own reality. With Lacey gone, Rocio would no longer have an escape. Ideally, she would finally get help and put her life back together, but that is probably just wishful thinking. Back in Grace's interview, she further distances herself from the entire situation, claiming that she doesn't even know if her former co-founder is alive. However, when Rocio makes an appearance in the final shot of the video and says hello, we clearly get an answer. Also, it's important to note that this final clip is outside of the game, so whoever put together this video must have access to Rocio somehow. My theory is that Ghost Tundra is more involved in all of this than they present themselves to be, but I can't say for sure just yet. I'm not sure how obvious I made this throughout the rest of the video, but the series is a work of fiction, but not an ARG, according to the creator. So many videos inspired by Lacey's games have been uploaded to YouTube, each one focusing on a different aspect of that good old feminine horror. If you're interested, Ella's Emergency Makeover and Miss May's Doctor's Office are two that I recommend watching. Another Lacey video seems to be on its way relatively soon, so I might revisit the series, especially if we get any new information, which I'm sure we will. But for now, I want to thank you so much for watching. My goal this year is to get a new video out every month, which is very intimidating, but hopefully by saying it out loud, I will hold myself accountable. Fingers crossed, we'll see. But yeah, see y'all later and stay safe out there.